There was a time in my career where I just wasn't good at it. Now I know like who I am and where I'm at, and I know like what my triggers are, to be able to say like, I need to pull myself, out of this. And it's been a long time coming. My first role out of school was an executive development program with a Fortune top 50 manufacturing company. You spent your entire regular work week just as anyone else would, and then you also had kind of coursework, multiple hours a month focused on developing yourself. And so I've spent the bulk of my career learning how to take hard feedback about myself and how to grow and develop and understand that feedback, as hard as it is my friend, but it doesn't come easy.
Hey everyone, we've got a great guest on the Second in Command podcast today. Awesome guy, Brent Hagan, who is the Chief Supply Chain Officer at Lob. Brent's the guy making sure that billions of personalized mail pieces get to where they need to go, running all the logistics, supply chain, and operations for this amazing platform. He's worked at huge companies like Amazon, Deliver and Eden, and he's a pro at handling super tricky logistics situations and systems, making delivery routes faster and building strong supply chains that mix old school operations with modern tech. Brent also has some serious brain power. He's done a bunch of executive programs at Wharton, has a bachelor's degree in organizational leadership from Purdue, and he's got a focus on manufacturing and engineering tech. Today, he's going to talk about some really interesting stuff, like how he helped a 12-year-old startup kick off its next big chapter, how he avoids getting stuck in every single meeting, and why feedback is his secret weapon. He's also going to share how he spots up-and-coming leaders inside the organization, how he keeps teams and projects on track with the company's vision, handles switching between tasks like a champ, and also how he decides what's important enough to tell the board and the CEO. You're going to love this episode. You can also watch all of our Second in Command podcasts on our Second in Command podcast YouTube channel. Please make sure you like and subscribe. We'll see you on the inside. So Brent, welcome to the Second in Command podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me, Cameron.
Yeah, looking forward to doing this with you today. Thank you for making the time, clearing your calendar. Why don't we start off with you just walking us through what Lob does? I know you're the Chief Supply Chain Officer at Lob, kind of second in command in the organization. What does the company overall do?
Yeah, Lob is a direct mail automation platform. So we believe ourselves to be an orchestration engine for customers to have a means to send mail downstream to your home. And so we operate in an entirely third party manner, meaning we leverage a network of third party manufacturers across the United States to execute those campaigns very quickly and cost effectively.
And by manufacturers, those like the print houses or marketing agencies. What are those?
Yeah, it would be the print houses as well as the logistics network that's tied to them.
Okay, it's interesting being a Canadian. And I've lived and worked in a couple of different countries, 3 different countries now. But when I was in the US, sending out direct mail was huge, and in Canada, not so much. Why is the Canadian? Do you have any glimpse on why the Canadian market is so small? I mean, we get one flyer every 3 or 4 days, and never a magazine. And in the US, I come back every day with like a stack of unaddressed ad mail or mail.
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with postal cost. It's not that different from the UK where it's highly restrictive, and I'll give you some context. This year, the USPS will probably send 90 billion pieces of mail. If you were to look at Royal Mail in the UK or Canada Post, you might do 9 billion pieces of mail. So it's definitely um, way different, like you indicated, and a lot of that is because of its cost prohibitive. But we actually have a number of customers that operate in Canada and the UK. I think what's really important is that those messages are personalized and meant for you, right? Being very purpose driven. So you're more likely to touch it. You're more likely to hold on and say like, what is this? And really, is there a call to action for you to do something? And so when those sort of pieces work, regardless of the cost structure, attribution modeling shows that actually direct mail has the most likely call to action versus social media, email, any of the other marketing types.
Well, and it's interesting. I mean, I was running an organization 30 years ago called College Pro Painters. It went on to become the largest residential house painting company on the planet. We had 9,000 people painting houses every year, but I was doing in Toronto alone millions of direct mail pieces every summer. And it was because we had no one else to compete with. I mean, the flyer was in the mailbox, and when the homeowner went out to grab the mail, there were three pieces of mail and my one flyer. So they looked, it didn't matter what the cost was, there was nobody to compete against. I don't understand why cost even matters when there's so many companies could really take that over, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think when you begin to look at it in terms of attribution, the the most robust marketing companies out there, they understand the value of direct mail,
Yeah.
and it's while it's a large investment for them, it's a critical investment for them, and they absolutely see that.
Yeah, that was all we ever did with College Pro, and I think it was mostly because we had these 800 franchisees that we had to mobilize very quickly, and we just took control of their marketing and kinda pushed that out, and then we left the rest up to signs and going door to door. So you guys, you talked to me just before going live, you said Lob's a bit of a 12-year-old startup, and you're launching your second act. What's your second act mean, and how are you still a 12-year-old startup?
Oh, we've launched a company called Lob Logistics, which outside of my operating duties as chief supply chain officer, I'll actually be managing that revenue line item as well as VPGM. And that is beginning to be the conduit, not just between our existing customer base, but also print manufacturers and a means of distribution downstream to the USPS. When you look at that space, it's highly fragmented. There's also, pretty significant barriers to entry, mostly having to do with fixed cost and structure. Those are areas that we believe that we've solved with technology versus large fixed capital investments. And so we're very excited about it. We're signed our first contract this week, and we look forward to the long journey ahead.
And is that gonna be becoming more of an integrated company? Like, are you gonna be able to go back to all of your current client base and sell them this solution as an add-on, or
Yeah,
is it a whole different
yeah.
customer base?
No, great question. It'll be both, for sure. It'll be a complement to our existing customer base. Lob was the first customer of Lob Logistics, which also helps us when we're building this technology to be able to say, like, what problem are we solving? What areas in the market do we see the biggest challenges, and what can help us and our existing customer base solve those problems? And so all of it comes with not just the increase in revenue, but also reduced unit economics to our existing customer base, as well as now that we're managing those elements of the logistics value stream, the downstream reliability will go up as well. So it's something that we're not just excited about because of the new customers and the incremental revenue, but also because of what it presents to our existing customers.
That makes sense. So in your role, there's an opportunity to get dragged into the day-to-day in all kinds of different areas that don't necessarily give you the highest ROI, and it's not necessarily what you should be focusing on. How do you decide what to focus on and where to give your time and energy?
Yeah, a lot of it comes between a balance of understanding vision and understanding execution. At law, we call it operating at multiple altitudes. And so what that means is there's times when I'm going to be at a very high altitude, and maybe I'm talking to a board member or I'm talking to an investor. Of some sort, and I'm gonna be operating at one altitude, or maybe I'm just driving strategy for the business overall. But there has to be times, and I was actually just talking to our CEO about this yesterday, where you have to go to a lower altitude and you have to be able to get into the details and really, really sweat the small stuff. Um, the hard part becomes how do you pick which one you're doing, and so do you have the right cadences to be able to raise those flags with your teams to understand when they need help? Maybe they don't even know that they need help, but do you have the right cadences in place for you to have a mental model to say, I need to dig in here and start asking more questions?
And how do you know when you're kind of crossing the line then from giving them help and then starting to do the work for them? Like taking the monkey off their back. What's the balance there?
Yeah, I want them to be able to solve problems, and a part of them having autonomy is also taking ownership. So there's a lot of times where I very deliberately pull myself back and help them get to the answer without solving the actual problem for them, and certainly not executing it for them. It's something that I really want them to be able to do, but it's hard, it's actually another piece where we've talked to our a CEO a number of times who was the COO before he became the CEO. He was very good at helping teams solve problems. But once he found the solution, he's like, "Well, I can do this really quickly. I'm just going to do it." And it's like, "No, no, no. Like, we got this. Let us do it. It's okay." So it's something that I take a lot of pride in is helping my team get there, but not crossing the finish line for them. Those successes should be enjoyed by them, but it's also a part of having ownership that they need to deliver on it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I kind of think of it like a parent's job. Our job is to help grow our children so that they can move out of the house, right? So that they can become these happy, healthy, independent adults. And I remember when I was raising my kids, I would tend to try to get them to do stuff, and my wife was kind of doing a lot of it for them. And then we talked about it, and I said, in many ways, we're doing the kids a disservice. So I went and I found this age-appropriate chores for children, right? Like age 2, they can put their own toys in a toy box, they can stack their own books, they can put their clothes in a dirty laundry hamper. Age 6, or 7, they can make their own lunch. And when I found this, these were all chores like from the 1940s and 1950s. I'm like, we're really helicopter parenting our children, like in making their lunch for them when they're 15 years old and driving them to school when they can get on their bicycle and get their ass to school on their own. Like, we just need to raise children differently. And I think that's the same with growing people inside the company, right? We can always give them the answer and do it for them, but our job is to get results through others and to grow them. So, what do you focus on growing people when you've got people working for you, other than making their own decisions? Are there other things that you also focus on in terms of growing them?
Yeah, I mean, much like your child analogy, which I have an 8-year-old and a 3-year-old, right? So we're really watching some forced independence, right? Like where they want to do certain things, but they want you to do certain things. That analogy certainly fits with our employees as well. So I have um, a number of direct reports, but they're all in very different stages of their career. And so much like the child analogy, I need to treat each one of them differently based on where they're at. There's some on my team who really need a specific amount of help as it relates to development, and just like we were just talking about, enabling their team to be successful. And there's others that really lack an overall kind of macro level business understanding, especially as it relates to like FP&A. And so when we're talking about doing something, they might have really, really great instincts on like, hey, like this is just the right thing to do. And much like we were just talking about before, I'm going to guide them and saying, well, why is it the right thing to do? And they can kind of put it there, but they can't quantify the ROI that's tied to it. Well, if they want my job, the next thing they're going to do is have to go to the CEO, and then the CEO is going to say, "That's great. If they have the right idea, go explain it to the board." And what's the board going to ask? Right? They're going to see exactly how it's tied back to the P&L. So I really have to help guide them down that path without giving them all the answers. When I could probably do that work, maybe with the help of Chat GPT, maybe not, but in about 5 minutes. And it's going to take them, maybe a half a day. But I'm going to guide them down which resources to talk to, how I think about it afterwards, and tell them, directionally, are they headed the right way? And that can honestly be the hard part, because you could get it done faster.
So have you worked on your skills around things like situational leadership and coaching and teaching? Like, are there any specific soft skills of leadership that you've worked on, or is it stuff that's come naturally to you over time?
It's not natural. Anyone that's watching this podcast that knows me is laughing their ass off right now, because of that question. It's an area that I've really had to focus on. There was a time in my career where I just wasn't good at it. Now I know like who I am and where I'm at, and I know like what my triggers are, to be able to say like, I need to pull myself out of this. And it's been a long time coming. My first role out of school was an executive development program um, with a Fortune top 50 manufacturing company. And uh, you spent your entire regular work week just as anyone else would, and then you also had kind of coursework, multiple hours a month focused on developing yourself. And so I've spent the bulk of my career learning how to take hard feedback about myself and how to grow and develop and understand that like that feedback, as hard as it is my friend. But it doesn't come easy. And I don't know a lot of operators that it does come easy for. You're so fixated on getting that next project done, getting to that milestone, understanding the people skills behind it, and the soft skills can be a real challenge. And what I didn't know early in my career or really understand is that it's not just about this project. It's not just about the next project. It's about continuing those relationships over time and watching them build on each other. And so when you start really doing that, teams will come back to you with their ideas. And now you're really, cooking with gas when that sort of things happens, right? It's not just checking a box like, yep, got this done, got this done, got this done. But now you're working collaboratively to build a roadmap and execute on it together. Like that's when it gets really cool.
Interesting. All right. So you've worked on those skills. You mentioned kind of the stuff around feedback. What was it specifically that allowed you to start accepting feedback as, okay? That's a tough one to really swallow for a lot of people, me especially.
Yeah. I don't think there was a specific moment in time. I constantly asked for it. When you look at my overall career trajectory, um, I've had a lot of success that I'm really fortunate for, and I've been surrounded by great mentors along the way. Some of my first mentors are still my existing mentors, and I knew. Well, taking a step back, my first job out of school, they had me build what's called a career flight plan, which was where do you see yourself at the end of your career? What is your goal? And it wasn't just like, oh, I want to be a COO, I want to be a CEO. Um, it was what steps do you need to take in order to get there? Like imagine kind of a bottoms up plan. And what skills do you need to develop over time in order to achieve that? Which I think is an element that people don't necessarily understand.
Yeah.
The only way for me to achieve the things have wanted that I've desired to achieve professionally was to take really hard critical feedback. And it's not just personal feedback, it's feedback about projects, it's feedback about interactions, it's feedback about decision making and how do you think critically about something and the
Can you give
long-term impacts of it.
a specific area that you've grown with some feedback? Was there something that stands out?
Yeah, there's a moment in time very specifically when I was with Amazon, and I was doing what's called the Discover Insights color exercise, which paints everybody into very specific colors, and
Mm.
you have a representation of every single color. What was interesting about this specific version of that is that you had to do it both for how you interact as a professional to maybe 300 questions and how you would respond to a scenario as a professional, also as a person. And when I was sitting there with the consultant that was doing this with me, she was like, "What's really interesting," she was like, "You're here as a professional and you're way over here as a person." And I was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "Well, why is that?" I was like, "I'm faking it." Like, I think my team wants me to interact with them one way, and so I go and do that. I know my boss has expectations of how I'm gonna do that, so, like, I do those things. And she's like, "But that's not who you are?" And I'm like, "No, not really." And she's like, "You must be exhausted." And I was like, I am exhausted. I was like, I'm absolutely exhausted from doing it. And she was like, you're never gonna make it that way. She's like, just so you understand, she's like, if I did this with any executive in Seattle, she's like, they would be within a percentage point of each other in terms of how they act at home is who they are at work. She's like, we have to find that balance for you and we have to make it work. And that is where my leadership approach um, dramatically changed and really skyrocketed in terms of my alignment with my team, how we feel about each other. And actually, there's a number of people who worked for me on that team in particular that have gone on to new roles with me in different sites, different business functions, and different companies multiple times since then.
Wow, interesting. Yeah, you talked earlier and written some stuff around people that had worked for you in operations that are now working with you in different roles and they've elevated. How do you find emerging leaders? How do you know, who those solid A players and B players are to work on and to help grow?
Yeah, for me, it really starts with, are they a subject matter expert in any specific function? And then do you see them a willingness to become a more well-rounded leader, as well as do they manage up well? Do they manage down well? Do they manage laterally well? Like which one? You know, if there has to be at least one because you can begin to polish all the others. And so once you find somebody that has a passion within a specific space and you can align that passion to their job function, they're immediately going to set themselves apart from a lot of others, right? Because their skill set and what they're working on both align to be able to have high potential outcomes. And then once you see that something is working with them incredibly well, whether that's managing down, managing up, you can begin to leverage those points to
Mm,
show them how to execute on the other things, right? Like if I manage laterally incredibly well, that means that you should be really great at selling a vision and bringing people around you to support it without having any influence over those people, right? Because you have no direct control over those people. Like that is a very, very powerful skill set to have, you know, and so now you can polish that and help them go and deliver for the broader business. So you start bringing that attention for them. Now that person can work more cross functionally on roles that maybe they haven't before, and so they get broader business perspective. It can be very powerful.
You've spoken a couple times around vision, specifically like vision for the organization and vision with the CEO. How do you align your teams and people and the projects to the vision? How do you make sure that people are working on the right stuff?
Yeah, for me, I think it starts with first having a vision and having a North Star or a series of KPIs tied to it from the top. So I like to go tops down from that approach and establishing a vision. After that exercise is done, it's all bottoms up, you know, and so it's not that it doesn't work. It doesn't work for me. And I think that it's while it could take longer, doing bottoms up planning and tying that back to your vision, it accomplishes a few things. One, you're going to begin to establish metrics at every level of the business that begin to tie back to your North Star. So now you've instantly gained insights into, am I winning or losing? Two, you've now driven ownership, and with ownership comes accountability to every level of your organization, tying that back to your North Star. You know, and so now when you've done those things, you can start establishing projects, roadmaps, action plans, and all of those elements to drive the business deliverables that you want. But so much of it with that bottoms up planning, it's so important to establish that ownership and accountability with every level of the organization. Once they get bought into it, you kind of go on cruise control to a certain degree.
Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking about a former mentor of mine from years ago, and he said there's nothing worse than watching a group of highly skilled, highly motivated, highly productive people working on the wrong things.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, we've run into it here before. You know, one of the pieces talking about our CEO again, um, he will, if you bring him an idea, he's going to give you all the runway in the world to go and execute on it for a little bit. And it's a piece where, in a world in which resources are finite, not every idea is a good idea, and we can't run with all of them. Well, how do we take the creativity of those teams, not deflate them by saying no, but channel that creativity that delivers business results that we want? Well, that starts with casting a vision that all of them can get behind, right? Because now their mental focus is going to be, oh, this is the direction that we're going, and so it has to start with vision casting.
So how do you say no? Because at times we have to say no, right? At times we have to say no more often than we say yes. So how do you say no without deflating? Is it tying it to the P&L? Is it tying it to the vision and the goals? Is it, um,
Yeah, for me, a lot of it ties back to the P&L. Honestly, I think that the more objective that you can be in saying no in something that a person's emotions tied to this sort of thing, it generally is fairly subjective, right? So when you can move that into objective, it's going to be a benefit, and that's where a lot of it comes. Like we just talked about with one of my employees, let's understand total business impact. One of the tools that I'll often use is a prioritization matrix or a C&E matrix, and understand what problems are we trying to solve right now as a business. Is it speed? Is it cost? Is there quality? Right? Like, what outcomes do we want to come to? And when all of us can begin to agree on what those are, we can then very objectively say, okay, here's our list of all the things everybody wants to work on. What begins to deliver on the things that we agreed are the key priorities for the business? Now it becomes very objective of, hey, we've got a finite amount of resources. How many of these things do you think we can do? This many when our list is this long? Great. Here's the first ones that we're going to do. And hey, if one of these fails, we're going to do the next one on the list. It becomes pretty challenging for people to not get behind that
mhm.
methodology.
Yeah, it makes sense. When it always drove me crazy when my mom and dad would say no because I said so, or no because it's my house, or like that doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, why don't you just say no because we can't afford it, or no because it's going to ruin your dinner, or no, like, be a reason that I can understand or wrap my head around, but no because it's my company, or no because I'm your CEO is just a stupid way to lead. So that,
Yeah, I saw there's a comedian telling a story about when he was a kid and he asked his dad for $3 to go to a dance. And the dad said, "Sorry, I don't have $3." And he's like, "Then how are we here, Dad? Like, how are we here? How are we living in a house right now, eating dinner, and we don't have $3?"
right.
And so he was like, "Well, if you can go find it in the change jar," he's like, "it's all yours." And he's like, "And there was some $3." And it's something that
But
joke always
it,
makes me laugh.
But it's important to show people the P&L and how a P&L works. Like, they don't understand. Well, a lot of employees focus on revenue coming in, but they don't understand the cost of goods sold. They don't understand gross margin. They don't understand overhead. They don't understand the cash conversion cycle of when we actually get paid or prepaid. Like, they don't understand taxes. Like, so they just,
Yeah.
unless we show them, they don't understand that. One of my big kind of pet peeves has been that early stage managers, people that are managing for their first or second time, their answer to every problem tends to be hire more people. And that's rarely the answer to the problem. How do you push back on people when it's we need to hire somebody else? I go back to like the stop, optimize, automate, outsource. How do you approach that before saying yes to a new hire?
It's actually really funny that you bring this up. So, um, I joined one of Lob's strategy offsites with the executive team before my actual start date. The CEO was like, "Hey, I think you should come out here." I was already talking to them about joining the team, like, see what we're all about. And every executive leader was presenting their project plans for the year, what their strategy was. Every single one of them wanted more people. And I was like, "Man, it's like this is a lot." Like, and I kind of spoke up. which the new guy who doesn't even work here yet sitting in the corner, and I'm like, hey, do we really need these people? Like, there is everyone completely constrained now, or these skill sets, that we're missing? And I think, and these are highly tenured
Yeah.
executives,
Yeah.
and so this isn't first or second level managers. And I think what it comes down to is like, what problem are you trying to solve? And has that problem changed over time? And how did we establish these skill set gaps, where this is the thing that the business has to have right now, in order to achieve it?
Well, and yeah, and can we solve that problem without adding headcount? Can we solve that problem? Because
Yeah,
what always tends to happen is we end up saying yes to the headcount, and then we have to go get more sales and revenue just to get back to break even
yeah.
again. That was stupid. Like,
Well, and the headcount doesn't go away, right? That becomes the biggest problem. Is this a short term problem or a long term problem? And so I'll give you a really good example. We have a need in our business for product marketer. Like, absolutely, unequivocally, we need a person that is that conduit between product and marketing, and understanding go to market strategy tied to the things that we're building. That's a skill set that we've lacked for a long time now. Um, and that's okay. Like, those things are going to come up. Now, are we going to take the hit, from a cost perspective that's going to be associated with that headcount? Do we think that this is going to lead to incremental revenue? Well, it should. And so now we start getting into this productive conversation of, yes, like, this role exists because we should close more deals as a result. How many more deals? Right. And so, and it's not about, for me, it's not about like, we need to establish a number for what this role is going to achieve as a result. It doesn't mean that we're gonna be right, but at least we're flexing the muscle like you and I talked about, to be able to tie it back to the P&L to say, this headcount's gonna have this result. Were we right or were we wrong? And we're gonna get a better batting average over time of predicting those things.
when leaders get into this kind of role that you're at, this like second in command role, and this level in an organization, you're never doing the same job day in and day out. It's you call it context switching, where you're doing something, you get a switch. You're leading somebody, then you're doing something. You're leading a different style. You're in a meeting. You're talking to the board. It's completely different things that you're working on. It's different skills. It's different ways of being. It's different communication styles. How do you context switch? What do you have a way to be able to kind of like shake it off and start into the next thing that you're working on in a new frame? How do you get rid of whatever you were working on 5 minutes before and show up in the new meeting set for that one? Can you walk us through some of that?
I just did this on Friday. I had a really brutal call that I didn't enjoy very much. And my next call was somebody on my team. And I asked him a question. It was a very short question. And he was like, yeah, yeah. And he gives me an answer. He's like, is everything okay? And it would have been so easy for me to be like, no, it's not, and just gone sideways. And that's an area like where I very deliberately focus on myself, is like, you got to pull yourself out of this, right? Like, don't don't let that pressure influence your next conversation, your next call, your next day, your next week. I also call it like being the shock absorber. Like, I'm going to have calls with the board, with our investors, with our CEO, maybe with our my peer group, and I think the further up you go, as an executive, into those conversations, the more direct that they become.
Mm.
Almost always
Sure.
much more results driven, much more focused on exactly what problem you're solving. Not that there isn't, camaraderie and dynamic, funny back and forth, but the meetings are much more purpose driven. How do you take that and take that context and deploy it to your team, your customers, your partners, in a way that is going to put tremendous value on the relational rents that you've built? And so, go ahead.
You're also like a two-sided funnel where you've got all this information that you bring down to the direct reports, but then you also have a lot of information that you bring up to the CEO and the board.
Yeah.
How do you decide what to filter and what they don't need to hear from you at the CEO and board level? Because if you come up to them with all the problems and stuff you're working on, it becomes overwhelming and not productive that way as well.
Yeah, it's so I try to eliminate, and this is true on both sides, unnecessary noise on either side, right? If, for example, when we're launching Lob Logistics, it's important for the team to understand how the board views this initiative and the amount of investment that we're going to make, and how we gauge success, because that's what we're going to be measured on. But they don't need to understand who agrees, who disagrees, and what details are happening in between. Same when I'm talking to the board about Lob Logistics. They don't need to understand the challenges inherently with one partner that's different from the other, and why one takes longer to close a contract than the other. Those are all unnecessary distractions that we need to be capable of solving on our own.
Mm.
And so it's one of the pieces that I probably didn't understand early in my career, that, like, I'm firmly grounded in now, is doing that context switching and what's actual noise. And it's an area where every leader should be able to challenge themselves. It's one of the things that I actively do. I'm highly reflective, coming out of meetings, coming out of action plans, not just in terms of my interactions, but entering the meeting or exiting the meeting. How did people feel about that? What questions are they going to ask me? And I really challenge myself to say, like, if I'm them, like, what question am I going to ask as a result of this? And I'm going to go solve that. Whether somebody asks me that question or not, I'm going to go solve that problem and be able to answer it. That helps you start framing your dialogue a lot better.
That's interesting. I like that. So, in your prep notes, when we'd asked you a couple of questions, you talked a little bit about some questions that you ask yourself on kind of a weekly basis. That seems to be a little bit of a debrief, like what went well last week, what didn't go well last week. How often do you do that debrief with your teams? Is it on a project by project basis, or is it part of your, your weekly meeting rhythms?
Yeah, it's probably another one of those questions where if somebody's listening to this, they're gonna say, like, "Oh, shit," like, here we go. Um, every day, every week, every month, every quarter, my teams know exactly what to expect from me. So, a lot of companies, will call it Gimba, for the most part. Um, and, my approach doesn't change, regardless of what team I'm with, or what problem we're solving, or what, um, industry we're in. Every day, every week, every month, every quarter, what went right? What went wrong? What did we learn as a result of it? And what are we doing next? And how do we know if that's going to work? When you get on that cadence of being able to look at your day, your week, your month, your quarter, like that, um, the sky's the limit, in terms of your potential, and the way in which you're answering those questions and the way in which you're actioning those questions, should change with the length of time in which you're reflecting on it as well, right? If you had a really bad Monday, don't let that influence necessarily the entire month review for what went wrong, unless you believe that what went wrong on Monday can happen on any given day ever again, right? If the case is like that broke on that day, and that can break every day of the month, no matter what, we haven't fixed anything, then we need to action that. We need to do something about it, and we need to increase reliability there, and so, that's where I really challenge my team to think. Now, my cadence with my existing team, we're doing that, every single week, month, and quarter, not necessarily, every single day.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I think it also goes back to just coaching individuals that if you start with getting them to tell you what went well, they're more apt to take any of the feedback of where they can improve. And if they
Yep.
give themselves the areas to improve second before you give them the feedback, then they're really apt to learn, right? They're getting self-reflective on their own.
Well, it's just like we talked about, like, how do you take critical feedback? Like, missing that, this is operations.
Yeah.
This is running a business. Like, misses happen. We shouldn't look at this as a failure. Every time that something goes wrong, we learn something as a result of it. We shouldn't be scared of that sort of thing. We should look at that kind of as the worst possible gift where, we're going to get better as a result. Like that's absolutely winning in every sense of the word. And so when you can reflect on that yourself and be critical, you shouldn't be worried about how the rest of the world does it because very few companies and leaders solve problems that way, that religiously. And the ones that do are hyper successful. And so everyone should be very encouraged about that approach. And that helps you start taking feedback from others without taking it, overly critical, being
Yeah,
overly critical about it.
I tried covering that in my Invest in Your Leaders training. There's three of the modules are really kind of tied together there. One is situational leadership, another is around coaching, and then another is around running the one-on-one meetings. And the ability to deliver that kind of feedback is critical to people. So, Brent, I'd like you to go back and give yourself some advice. If you were to go back to the younger you, the 21 or 22-year-old Brent Hagan starting out in his career, what advice would you give the younger you that you know to be true today?
Um, Say yes a lot. Uh, take on the next project.
Mm,
Um, i- i- this is the piece. So I do courses with universities pretty often, especially Purdue, where I went to school, and I'll often talk to like senior level engineers, senior business students, and the question that's always asked, I don't care what school you're at, which audience it is, like, hey, do you have any regrets? And I think it's super easy for a successful executive to be like, yes, I wish I didn't take that phone call. I wish I set my cell phone down on the weekend. I wish, I didn't do X, Y, and Z. With While not contextualizing the idea that they got to where they are as fast as they are as a result of doing those things. And so there are certainly elements, in my life, personal and professional, where it was like I could have done this better, and um, how you go and execute on something. I talked to you about that a little bit, early in my career. Like I was so focused on task management versus building the relational rents that are going to make executing those tasks easier. Um, that led to me having to do more work than I needed to do because I was doing it by force, and not by leveraging the people around me. Like those were the sort of things that people should really reflect on.
love it. Brent Hagan, Chief Supply Chain Officer for Lob. Thank you so much for sharing with us on the Second Command podcast. Really appreciate your time today.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
That was great.